Welcome everyone. This is the first tutorial on how to do higher order learning using a mind map. Basically in this video I'm going to explain to everyone what is higher order learning and why everyone needs to learn this way as opposed to lower order learning, which is how we used to learn before we started getting older in school and having to do serious exams like GCSEs and so on. And to begin with, let's look at the definitions or levels of learning as defined by Bloom's Taxonomy, which is a hierarchy showing the levels of understanding when it comes to higher order learning and lower order learning. So at the very bottom level, you have what is known as remember. This is basically whatever you read or listen to and you retain in your mind, you can recall it later as a fact or a piece of information from your memory. So it's known as just simply remembering information that you learn. The second highest level is to understand what that fact or piece of information actually means. So to know the definition of it, like you would look up the meaning of a word in a dictionary. The third highest level is then to use that information in some way. So to apply that information to solve problems, to make decisions, and so on, to use it in some way in your life. And then the level above that is where we leave the realm of lower order learning, which is simply to remember, understand, and apply information. And instead now we are looking at it more deeply. So we're analyzing it. And this is where most people don't understand what analyze really means. And it's very simple. Analyze simply means to break down, to see everything in groups. So instead of seeing it as a whole, you look at it piecewise and you sort of look at it in its relative group. So the idea of analyzing information is to see where it fits, where it belongs. And that's how you break things apart. You look at a mass of information like in a book, a lot of information which is in a book, and you simply break it up and put it into interconnected, related groups in order to study it more closely and to understand where it fits into the overall scheme of things. This way, our brains can actually understand where to place it overall in them so that they can remember it for later. After analyze, we have the next highest level, which is evaluate. And from this, we can see that basically this is where you start judging the information after you've studied it and understood it and analyzed it. You see how valuable it is. So what's its importance? What effect does it have? What does it do? Is it a big effect, a small effect, and so on? You evaluate. You basically judge the value of that information to see whether it's important enough for you to remember or use or not. And then lastly, there is create. Create sits on top of everything because once you remember enough information, you understand it, you can use it, you can analyze, you can study it, you can group it, and you can judge its value. You can then use it to make new things, to write a book, to make new recipes, to come up with solutions for new unique problems and so on. Create is normally once you know enough about a subject that you can actually become an expert in it and use that to do new things in that subject. That comes much later in life. So the first 5 levels are what we'll be looking at. And we can roughly divide these here in the middle between analyze and evaluate above and understand and remember below. So in the middle, there's apply. So what we really need for higher order learning are these 3: apply, analyze, and evaluate. But the order, the sequence in which we do this is very important. That's the thing that most people miss. So when you have a new piece of information, now I'll give you a real life example. When you look at something and you want to remember it in the long term, you wouldn't simply just look at it in a very general, basic way, which is to just know what it means. Instead, you would go beyond that. So the first thing you need to see is how does it relate to the rest of the big picture. So if we use the example of a car is made up of different pieces or parts. Now in our brains, we can picture what a car looks like because we've seen a car visually. So we know the thing as a whole. So this is the big picture, this whole car that you can see on the road, which is driving in front of you every day. However, if you want to study a car in depth, you have to know its parts and see what they do, how they interact with each other, what effect they have on one another, how important is that effect, whether it's good or bad, whether it's important or not. And then you can see the inside of the car, and you can see its inner workings. You can understand and apply and use that car in your daily life to do what you need it to do. So by first analyzing, what we do is we look at the big picture, which is the whole car, and we break it up into its common parts. So we have to now study it in bits, but we have to put those bits into similar interconnected groups. So we would take, for example, the car apart, and we look at the wheels, then we look at the doors, okay, and then we look at the windows, okay, and so on. And then we would group these into similar groups. So group the wheels together in one group, doors in another group, and windows in a third group. So we form, by analyzing, we can see that these pieces are related, and so we form their individual specific groups, but they're also interconnected. That means that they form one bigger picture, which is the car, together as a whole, but individually also they form their own specific groups, which are their related groups, and within that related group they're similar to each other. Like there's a group for the doors, the windows, and the wheels, for example. But they're all connected because they all connect together, join together, to basically form a car. Well, this is not the exhaustive list of the parts, but I'm just trying to make a point here with a simple example that everyone can understand, that how you see something is first you have to look at the big picture, and then you have to break that apart. So you analyze it. This is the analyze stage. Sorry, my spelling. Following analyze, then we have to evaluate. Evaluate is to see the effect. So we can see that the doors give a person access. They give entry. So we could then extrapolate here that the doors are important. In order to use a car, you have to first get into the car with the doors. So the doors come first. We give some kind of importance to the doors. And then once you're in, you need to start driving, so you need for that wheels. So the wheels would, come after the doors, and then you have to see through the windows, so the windows would come in the end. So we form a kind of a sequence where we can see how everything fits together. And this is where we start evaluating the effects and putting things together. And then once you put things together, you can apply. So you do that for the remaining parts, and you come up with the whole car. This is how you achieve higher order learning, by not just looking at the individual parts, but seeing how they fit together, how they work together, and how you can use them together. This is how you basically analyze, evaluate, and apply higher order learning to information. Rather than simply understanding, okay, if I was to just use lower order learning, I would focus on the lower levels of learning, which I understand and remember. And simply I had to look at just a window or a door and just look at them separately. Not even see if there was any connection between them, and just study them on their own as individual, discrete, independent bits of information. And so I wouldn't really understand how to see this in a more meaningful, in a more helpful way, where I can apply this information, use it in the real world, so it becomes more useful to me, and I know how it interacts, and I know how it fits together, and everything like that. This is where we need to use higher order learning in order to remember something better. Because now with higher order learning, this will be far easier to remember in the end, as opposed to this. And this is basically higher order learning in a nutshell. So in the next lecture, I will go through how we can apply this in real life with a subject that we study in school, for example, like physics or like chemistry or like biology, and then how to study that for your exams and apply higher order learning as opposed to lower order learning. That's what you've been doing before this when you were younger. Thank you.